Welcome to the Mavens Do It Better podcast. And now, your host, Heather Newman.
Hello, everybody. We are here for another episode of Mavens Do It Better. And I am on today, so excited. I'm on with Mr. Jesse Case, who is also the man who created our theme music that you hear before our podcast. So, Jesse, you want to say hi to everybody?
Hi, everybody.
Awesome. So, Jesse, where are you today in the world?
Right now, I am in beautiful Alhambra, Illinois, population 678.
Oh my goodness.
Well, no, as of 4 months ago, it went from 678 to 681.
Oh, wow.
682 if you count my dog.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Oh my goodness. So yeah, and I'm at home in Marina Del Rey today, anyway. So that's a little further afoot, but that's awesome. So I know a bunch about you, but Jesse and I don't know each other that well, but we have some mutual friends. Mary Jane Gibson and Mike Glazer have a really cool podcast called Weed and Grub, and I loved their music, and I was like, who did that? And so we connected through that, and so it's been fun getting to know him, and he's got this really cool background, and so you work at Second City. Will you tell everybody about that?
I do. Yeah, I do. So I started working at Second City about 10 years ago. We had, as a music director,
okay.
Which is sort of not a good title for what we do, and part of the reason for that is that there's no other job like it. So they were just like, oh, what's the closest thing that we have to call this position? Mm-hmm. It is partially music director. So you're at the piano and you are playing the music. But in addition to that, you're doing a lot of writing. You're doing a lot of sound design. You're just doing a lot of kind of material creation that would normally not be incumbent on a musical director of, say, a movie or a Broadway musical.
Right.
It's a whole different job in and of itself. It's very niche, very weird. A lot of writing, like I said, a lot of improvising, a whole lot of behind-the-scenes audio production work, both in music and in sound design. And it's an awesome job, and I love it. And I've been doing it there for about 10 years.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, most people know what Second City is, but I grew up in the Midwest and went to high school in Wheaton, and I think we've talked a little bit about that. So I'm very familiar with Second City. And will you tell everybody, just so if they don't know, what Second City is?
Yes, and thank you for asking that, because we definitely have. we run into this too. I do a lot of. The majority of my work these days with Second City is with our B2B corporate division, Second City Works. And we are constantly reminding ourselves that, even because we are so entrenched in kind of the artistic and comedy community, we forget that occasionally people are like, oh, what?
Right.
Circuit City? I thought they closed. So we do. So yeah, Second City is a comedy theater. We were founded in Chicago in 1959, and we have a who's who of famous alum that have come through and made original content and improvised for our 2 stages that are both in Chicago, and then additionally we've since expanded to Toronto, where we are making original material, in Hollywood, where we have a training center. There's touring companies. There's Second City Works, which is B2B arm. There's a huge training center. We just started a film school. Wow. Which is crazy.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, and all sorts of, we do a lot of theatrical productions as well. We partner with quite a few people. A lot of Chicago institutions like Lyric Opera of Chicago. We do a show at the Goodman every year. We work with, we just did a show with Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Every year we go out and we do a show at Woolly Mammoth in Washington, D.C. We do work at the Kennedy Center. We partner with a company in Japan that does a comedy, and the way that comedy and comedy entertainment works out there is much different. Is quite a bit of a different structure, but
Sure.
We work with a company called Morimoto out there. We work with a cruise ship company out of Shanghai. We do.
I had no idea. I had no idea that the expansiveness of the programming. That's amazing.
It's crazy, yeah, and it's I think what we found too, you know, and this is a lot of it is as we've the Second City Works part started about 20 years ago, and that was really kind of an eye opener for us. We realized that at the training center, a lot of people were coming. In fact, most of the people were there like not because they wanted to get SNL or because they wanted to do one of our stages, but they just like enjoyed improv for the sake of improv,
right?
And that was the wake-up call in realizing, not for me, I wasn't there. Hell, I was in middle school, but for whoever was working there at the time, realizing that, yeah, like this is the applicability of what we're teaching and the fundamentals behind it are, it is universal.
Yeah.
Like it makes lives better, really. And like, I mean, I sound like a hack when I say that, and I am a hack. But
you're a good hack, though.
As far as right, exactly. As far as the core importance of the stuff we teach and the philosophies we espouse, I've drank the Kool-Aid 100%.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a life hack, right? In the best sense of the word, and that, you know, empathy and being able to think on your feet and be in front of people, you know, it's like Toastmasters has been around forever. And, you know, it's just, I'm a theater geek, you know, dork myself. I came up in the theater, so I absolutely believe in all of that stuff. And it's cool to see that something that started off as just, you know, maybe that improv class more for artists, you know, I've seen that like expansion into corporate and how to, you know, bring that into schools and all of that. So that's so cool. I thank you for sharing all of that, because I had no idea. That's amazing. So
yeah, no doubt. I know we're everywhere, man, and it's constantly fascinating work because of that. You know, like we're having a lot of the work we do with clients, for example, particularly in the areas of like ideation, things like that, and then also, you know, just sort of when you're coming up with like, you know, for example, here's a company that does, insert like top line corporate thing here, you know, like, we have a new strategy this year involving synergy. Can you write a funny song about it?
Right.
Like, in order to do that, you have to, the conversation that you have to have and the thought process that goes into writing a song about something like that, it involves a lot of interesting conversation and a lot of interesting digging deeper, as it were.
Absolutely. Oh, that's super cool. And so where did you come up from?
I came from, I grew up in Colorado, in Boulder. Okay. And I went to, birth through college, I went to the University of Colorado, where I actually studied theater. Okay. Although I'd been playing piano since I was very, very young.
Right.
And moving to Chicago after college, relatively quickly found out that what I do was a job to begin with, and realized that it's like, oh my God, these are both of the things that I'm interested in, the theater and the music. This is a very sort of applicable blend for me.
Yeah, match made in heaven.
Yeah, took on an internship and then went and did an ensemble aboard a cruise ship and never looked back.
Oh wow, that's super cool. And so are you you're a pianist, but do you play a bunch of other things as well?
Yeah, I mean, like, yes, I do, but I wouldn't audition with them.
Fair enough. Okay.
You can do, you know, like, yeah, I play guitar like your friend's dad plays guitar. Where it's like, he's got it out at the campfire again. Oh, good.
Right. Fair enough. Oh, that's hilarious. And I know, you know, when we first started talking, I don't know, a few months ago, you were telling me about a studio. Do you want to tell everybody? I mean, having that become real and all of the things around that's super interesting. So did we tell everybody about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, yeah, the reason I bet there's been a hanging question in the air, I imagine, which is like, what is this dude doing in Alhambra, Illinois?
Yes.
Population 678 or 81, depending on when you ask. And the reason is that we moved. Alhambra is about 4 hours south of Chicago, so I commute up fairly regularly.
Okay.
And my job involved a lot of travel anyway. And primarily the reasoning for moving down here specifically was my wife and I just had a baby about 1.5 years ago, and having a baby with no family around is a tall order.
Yes.
So this is the area where my wife is from.
Sure.
It's about 40 minutes north of St. Louis.
Okay.
And part of the reason for buying way out was to get a bunch of land, and part of the reason for getting a bunch of land was to have a barn on the land, and part of the reason for having a barn on the land was to convert the barn into a music studio.
Let's put up a show!
Yeah, it was pretty, you're right, exactly. So we have that. We have a beautiful house now with 5 acres that's surrounded by what seems to be 1,000 acres. I don't actually, so here's what I realized about myself is I don't know what an acre is. Like, I mean, I know literally this is how much of a city boy I am. I know that an acre is a thing, but I can't physically in my brain imagine an acre. Like, I can imagine 50 feet. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh yeah, I can estimate that. I cannot estimate distance. So this could, so I'm surrounded by what appears to be 100 million acres. Right. And I know that my specific land is 5 acres because that's what they told me, and it's on the lease. Right. And oh my goodness. And out back is a 50 by 7. There you go, 50 feet. A 50 by 70 foot pole barn, machine shed that we just laid down concrete in yesterday. As a matter of fact, is the basis for the control room in the rear of the music studio, which I will use both as its sort of own separate business, and then also kind of just to is an ancillary benefit to the type of production work that I do, both for Second City and independently, namely podcast theme music. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that makes sense. I mean, if you're 4 hours away from the city and you need to do stuff, having your own studio out in the that completely makes sense. Oh my goodness. When do you think you're going to be ready to? I mean, I'm sure you work at home anyway, but like, when do you think it's going to be ready to rock it out from there? When you're having people come in and stuff, you going to have a big old launch? No, I don't think so. I think so. This has been interesting. This whole, basically what I'm doing is on the surface a really bad idea, and the reason it's a really bad idea is because the entire model of how you record music is changing very, very rapidly, and it's changing because the quality of recording that any random Joe can get in their basement of their house is going up exponentially, and the cost of doing so is going down exponentially. Right. So the reasoning why somebody, a musician or anybody else who might 10 years ago have gone to a studio is no longer a reason. You know, where you, like, a lot of the stuff that you can do at home, you can, it is stuff that a studio would normally do. Right. So it's a rapidly changing business, to say the least. Mm-hmm. So I personally use this, like, I have two advantages. One is that I have enough personal use for a studio that it makes sense for me to do some type of expansion and, locate myself in better digs just intrinsically. Mm-hmm. And then B, I have another job, which is working for Second City, so I can effectively subsidize the studio as the model grows. So what this has allowed me to do is kind of explore the business as I build it, which has been really interesting. Yeah. And also sort of horrifying, because the more you explore the studio business in particular, the more you realize, hey, like, nobody's building studios anymore. Right. And little studios that do exist are on, like, they're all on fire sale mode. They're all like, please come record here. We'll give you, half off or whatever. I don't know. It's an interesting, it's an interesting business to be a part of, and it's an interesting thing to be doing at this particular moment in musical history. So, which is all a very long way to answer the question. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm going to do like a full-on opening, because I think that the physical location of the studio is subsequent to the studio as a brand, and subsequent to the studio as an online location, a digital location. Gotcha. Can you share the name of the studio with everybody? I would if I had it. I've got a couple of thoughts. So I will say I was really, really down with Alhambra Audio. Alhambra, of course, being the name of the town that we're in.
Yep.
And for those of you who don't live in the immediate area of Alhambra, you may think of the Alhambra.
Yes.
The Alhambra, of course, being a beautiful red castle in Granada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. That's hundreds of years old and
sure.
Untold acres large.
Right.
I don't know. Don't ask me. And and that's, of course, that was my image. So like the
right.
imagery that the word Alhambra conjures up to me is of that, and is really, really cool to associate with the brand in the studio.
Yeah.
If you live around here, if you live in the immediate area and certain parts of St. Louis, Alhambra means something completely different. And Alhambra is the small town.
Okay.
Alhambra is the small town. That small town people go, hey, that's a pretty small town, and they make fun of it for being such a small town.
Right. Well, you could paint the barn red, right?
Right. That's true. I don't know if it would overcome years of bad branding by the area. But, red paint is dope. It's interesting, this is part of a whole area. Like, you think of, what's the one that everybody knows? Cairo is one. Mm-hmm. Where, there's a Lebanon here, except you pronounce it Lebanon.
Okay.
That's about 20 minutes away from here. There's this whole, triangle in this immediate vicinity where they just decided to take a bunch of, European and Middle Eastern names and mispronounce them. Yeah. And make them, and that's the name of the town now. It's a fascinating thing to me. Yeah. Both why anyone would do that, but also then the subsequent psychological effect of the name. Mm-hmm. These people have a completely different reference point for the word Cairo. Yeah. Sure. Than everybody else. I don't know. It's just an interesting. Yeah. Fair enough. It's interesting how you can change watching the context of a thing change. Oh yeah. Well, I was podcasting yesterday with a buddy, and he was talking about going to Harlem, and going to eat there, and how he was kind of known as the American there. And I knew what he was talking about because I know his life, and I knew that he was talking about Harlem in the Netherlands, not Harlem in New York City. And I made sure to clarify that, because those are very different places, although they share a name for a reason, New Amsterdam, New York, all that stuff. But it was very funny. I was like, everybody, we're talking about Harlem in the Netherlands. Right, got to clarify. We're talking about Harlem. Yeah, never would have known. And then the whole, it's interesting, because then the whole context, the entire conversation changes. Yeah. Because of the name of the word and the feeling of the word, rather. Completely. Yeah. No, it's funny like that. So, I think, God, it's so cool. That's really exciting. And I was thinking about you and, when working with you, building the music and stuff, which was really fun. And it was one of those where I was like, oh my God, I'm we're sort of chasing each other, because both of us travel a lot and, busy, and we nailed it and got it done, which was awesome. But it was really fun to do that with you and come up with. And is that sort of the process of I said I love the song Baby I'm a Star, I like funk, I like some nice bass and all of that, and then you and I going back and forth with each other. Is that sort of that must be from that I love riffing on that kind of thing with my my technical clients and even my artist clients, and too I don't know what jazzes you about that the most, and how I love it. Well, first of all, I bet you thought you were being vague. Yeah. You're the fact that you were able to articulate that you liked bass. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. That puts you above 90% of people who talk about music. And it's interesting because, music is one of those things. People know they like it, but they don't know why they like it. Right. Sure. I love this song, but if you really unpack the specific elements of why you like that song, and then also, of course, the specific cultural context and the specific personal context of that song for you, right? It becomes this entire thing. So it's interesting to make it for somebody, make it to order, as it were, because you really have to learn. You have to learn how to listen to people. Right. The improv background helps with that, obviously. But yeah, you really have to. You have to understand when somebody means they I want this a little louder, oh, like, no, you don't. You want it more exciting, or you want it more, want more. And then, okay, how do I excite this? Maybe I'll add symbols, you know what I mean? But nobody would have the language to articulate. Like, this needs more symbols, or this, this needs to, the tempo needs to slow down.
Yeah.
You know, like all of these technical changes, these small minutia of the actual details of the composition of the song have direct emotional consequences to the people listening, but it gets completely lost in translation.
Yeah.
So it's fun, translating that is a fun challenge.
Sure, and that obviously is what you do really well. It's like, let me introduce the hi-hat, or whatever,
Yeah, you sort of figure out how to, like, what they mean when they say, let's say this thing or that thing, you know. It's, a lot of people, I feel like, deal with that in their own way, though.
Sure.
You understand what you do really well, but your client, for example, doesn't.
Right.
And you have to learn how to listen to what they mean, and not to what they say.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Funnily, like my friend Matthew, we were talking about, clients, where it's like clients don't necessarily know how to be clients. You have to extrapolate, you have to sort of get into the minutia, really truly helping them get to what they want, because a lot of the times, they say they want one thing, but then there's like this goal of like, but I really want to be a, like I have to check a box, or I want to be a rock star, or this or that or the other thing, and you're like, wait a minute, you just asked me to write a blog, and
right.
So I think that transverses any industry or anything you're doing, you know what I mean? It's just, you happen to be doing it in music, I happen to be doing it in technical marketing for a lot of the time, so, but it's sort of same, I guess, but yeah.
100%. Well, and it's more importantly, the skills that are required to do it well are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So for you, like, where do you go for inspiration, or just to take, it seems like you're probably inundated with that all the time, but like, do you actually like unplug and go, I don't want to listen to any music right now, I don't want to talk, like, you know what I mean? Like, are you a golfer, or, do you do anything like that? That's
right. Yeah, no, people tend to be surprised at how little music I listen to, which is, like, it's interesting. Like, we have one of the a well-regarded director in Chicago named Nick Napier is known in the comedy circle for never watching any comedy.
Oh, okay.
Or very vocally not liking it, which I can fully appreciate, because like when you're inundated with it all day,
right? It
sort of is hard to like. It's hard to like take it in. You need a break from it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting, and also part of that is just straight up like I have a 1.5-year-old.
Right, you have a big distraction,
and another one on the way, and like you just don't have time.
Oh my goodness! Congratulations! Yay! Okay.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, due in April. Well, we're really excited. We have this whole like huge country house now. We got to start filling it with children. That's the American way, for Christ's sake. It's just like functionally it's a matter of time, it's a matter of time, but then also just like you need to get out. Let me think here. There's a quote that I like, or maybe it's not even a quote, but it's advice, and I don't know who it's from or how it goes, so apologies for the massive paraphrase here. The sentiment of which is something along the lines of, if you want to be a really good artist, you have to find a thing that's not your art. Right. It might be Hemingway, actually, now that I think about it, because of course he was he was hunting and traveling and drinking in Europe more than he was writing.
Right.
And as a result, his writing was really good, Charles Bukowski played the track is another one. You got to have the thing that you're like,
right.
Your hobby, you got to have a thing that keeps you from doing that.
Right.
And I don't quite have it. And I've always sort of struggled with getting one. I know intrinsically that I could use one, because I definitely get my head really far up my own ass when it comes to making music all the time.
Sure.
And not really having space from it. Mm-hmm. But I think what it might be, since moving out here, is lawn care.
Lawn care.
I've after living in a condo and before that another condo, and before that an apartment, and before that, a house with a bunch of college students
right,
my entire adult life.
right.
Like I've never really had like land,
Mm-hmm.
and then suddenly now I have like 5 acres, all of which is theoretically mowable.
Right. Oh my goodness.
So like, yeah, so I bought a riding mower, and I gotta say, just like the sheer act of knocking that thing down and
Yep.
trimming up the hedge
Mm-hmm.
and watering the garden and all this kind of like, you know, physical stuff, you know, like
sure.
has been very satisfying. So I think I might have found like
You're zen.
my drinking in Europe.
Mowing in Alhambra.
But mowing my lawn, right? Exactly. Well, it's interesting too. Like, you know, what we find when we're going in as Second City to a corporate environment
Mm-hmm.
is that a main challenge that people run into, especially when they call us in, is that people are treating their jobs as just jobs,
Yeah.
and in order to establish like a, you know, kind of a healthy
Yeah.
culture,
Sure.
you want to maintain and establish some emotional buy-in
Yep.
with your company.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
For sure.
obviously work-life balance is important too, and there's certainly people who, you know, like are work too much, whether they like it or whether they're forced to, or what, you know.
Right.
But I think in terms of that pure like emotional buy-in to the job that you're doing and the company you're doing it for,
Right.
that seems to be like kind of a pain point when it comes to the type of problems we're called in to solve.
Sure.
Artists have the exact opposite problem, which is they become their job. Like, oh, I am an actor or I am a musician.
Right.
And you have no separation. So when it comes time to do like what I'm doing, for example, which is build a business or build a brand, you're too close.
Right.
It's too hard to do precisely because you're too emotionally caught up, and the stakes become too high. You become afraid to fail, and you become afraid to really put yourself out there in the way you need to, and you become afraid, or in my case, like unwilling to take a proper mental break and go do something else.
Right.
And so it's interesting in our work when Second City and corporations collide, because we're coming at the same problem from opposite extremities.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, no, I think the world seems to be, you know, there's so much content. Everybody's a writer, everybody's a life coach, everybody's, you know, got 5 things you should do in the morning to make it awesome or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like you can't.
Yeah.
You know, but that's not a bad thing. But I do think that sort of like empathetically driven and culturally diverse and all of belonging and all of those things, something that I speak a lot about in the tech community. Like, I think that's everything and everyone, and I love it that Second City is, you know, has that programming, you know, and that that corporations are going, we need you, you know what I mean? Because I think that, yeah, people do, you know, you're like, it's like that Dunkin' Donuts commercial from forever ago, you know, it's like the dude gets up and he's like, time to make the donuts, and then he like goes to work and goes back to sleep and says it again and again, and it's like, you don't want that to be your life, you know? And
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to have like a, you know, that's the prevalence of like mission statements and things like that. Things to sort of create an at-large emotional context that helps people get on board with whatever, you know, awesome. Whatever you're manufacturing or doing for other people and that kind of thing.
Well, and maybe to wrap up, do you have any words of wisdom for other folks who are looking to kind of do what you do and get into the world that you're in? Things to think about?
Keep at it. Nope, hold on. That's good, but that's the thing is like that's, you know, just like every bit of, not every bit, but a large majority of the advice that I have received and unfortunately have doled out to people is often just like, hey man, just keep on plugging away. Good luck. Mm-hmm. I think there's something so I believe in the idea of making your own luck. Mm. I believe that that's something that happens. That's a very real thing that happens to people. When you get lucky, it's because you made it happen for yourself. And especially in my line of work, where, you know, you are often at the behest of other people asking you to work.
Right.
You have to. Being lucky is very important.
Yeah.
You know, and what luck boils down to is being at the right place at the right time. That's if there's a definition of luck. That's what it is. Someone who is able to be at the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. So in that, I think there's a little bit of a life hack, which is both of those things are to a certain extent within your control. You can figure out where the right place is for you. Mm-hmm. In my case, apparently it's Alhambra. We're going to see. And,
I love it.
And as far as being there at the right time, the trick is just to do it as much as possible. Right. Be doing it all the time, mm-hmm. and it partially cracked the code, as it were.
Yeah, I think it's like, I completely agree with you. I think sometimes it's about showing up, you know, and sort of being at that right place in the right time, or making a decision to, even if you don't feel like it, to go to that networking thing, or somebody invites you to something, and, and always be networking, always be, I mean, people are like, hustle hard, that whole sort of hashtag and stuff, but that's true. It is about the hustle and about being there and just doing what you love over and over and over and over again, right? Like Olympic swimmers become Olympic by what? Swimming. You know what I mean? A lot.
Just swimming a whole bunch. Just only swim. And you'll go to the Olympics.
Well, all right. There's more to it than that, but you know what I mean.
Something to that.
Yeah.
I think one of the ways that I think improv is magic, which is what I said earlier.
Yeah.
And every time I say that, Second City writes me a check for $15.
Nice.
So so thank you for this opportunity for personal enrichment. No, I think, but I do like improvisers often call themselves professional listeners, which I think is, speaking of Hackville,
right?
But I think it's true in that the best improvisers are always the best listeners.
Right. And
that, especially for me, I'm often next to the stage, improvising, underscoring.
Right.
And that is, that's a listening exercise all on its own. And one of the things I've noticed is that at events that I don't necessarily want to be at, but do have to be at for personal enrichment, not gigs, of course, but things that are more things that I'm doing, for more personal enrichment, I guess.
Uh-huh.
The way that I get things out, get something out of that particular event or that particular personal interaction or whatever, is by adding value to it. And they talk about in social media marketing, like if you want to. The way to get followers is to add value.
Yep.
So you don't want to just be up there promoting your next show or whatever. You want to be either making them laugh, which is a lot of the comedians that I work with. That's their primary model for getting followers, or retweeting interesting people, or adding in a significant way to the conversation, or giving advice, content marketing, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in a personal interaction, a very, very cheap and easy way to add value is by being a good listener.
Yeah.
Because people find in a lot of inherent value in just being listened to and being asked more questions.
Yeah.
And I think, so, that's definitely been something that sort of has helped me. And then especially, too, as I've started a business of my own and suddenly realized that my theater degree didn't give me any education. I've been, my new thing has been I'm at corporate gigs, I'm in the corporate world all the time.
Right.
I'm in, as an invited guest and a comedy DJ, but I'm there nonetheless. There's a lot of extra listening that I can do here, and there's a lot of value I can get aside from just the value of performing comedy for a living.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that's another awesome life hack. Thank you for that. I always say marketing, does it entertain or does it educate? And if it does both, you're winning, So that's super cool. Well, awesome. You're amazing. It's so nice to talk to you, and I love what you do. It's super cool, and I'm so glad we had Mike and Mary J to connect us. And you should check out their podcast, Weed and Grub. Super awesome. And people can, go to Second City and see shows and see just look up, it's secondcity.com, right? It's just secondcity.com?
Right, yeah, just secondcity.com, yeah.
Okay, awesome.
New website coming out early this year, too, I think.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Early 2019, they're doing a revamp of the website, which will be cool.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. It might be trash.
No.
I bet it's good.
Oh, come on. It's going to be awesome. And cool. Well, in the show notes, we'll put all the ways that people could get a hold of you and follow what you're doing and everything. And I just thank you for being on. It's so nice to hear your voice and talk to you. So thank you for that.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, folks. Well, this was another episode of Mavens Do It Better with Jesse Case, and you'll get to hear his fabulous music here in a moment to take us out. So have a great day, and thanks, everybody. The original music on this podcast was created by Jesse Case.